Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with an uncomfortable truth. Average used to be safe. You could show up, do just enough, blend in, and still live a decent life. That world no longer exists. Today, average doesn't protect you, it slowly erases you. Quietly, politely, without warning. The danger of being average is not that it feels painful, it's that it feels normal, comfortable, familiar, and by the time you realize it's costing you opportunities, respect, and leverage, the gap between where you are and where you need to be has already widened. This isn't about pressure or panic, it's about awareness. Because once you see how the game has changed, you realize something important. You can't afford average anymore, even if you wanted to. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a time when being average was not only acceptable, it was functional. You could meet basic expectations, follow familiar routines, and still earn stability, respect, and a predictable future. The systems around you were designed to absorb mediocrity. Institutions moved slowly, competition was limited, and the gap between good and great was narrow enough that it didn't matter much which side you stood on. That era has passed, and it did not end with an announcement. It ended quietly, which is why so many people missed it. Average has not suddenly become a failure, but it has become a liability. It no longer protects you from downside risk. It no longer guarantees progress. In fact, it often creates invisible drag. When you perform at an average level in a world optimized for speed and efficiency, you are not standing still. You are falling behind without realizing it. The cost is subtle at first: fewer opportunities, slower growth, less leverage. Over time, those small disadvantages compound into real consequences. The modern environment rewards differentiation more than effort. When systems can instantly compare performance, results, and reliability, average becomes indistinguishable from replaceable. This is not personal, it is structural. Technology, automation, and global access have raised the baseline. What once required effort now requires excellence just to stay relevant. Average output is easy to replicate, and anything that is easy to replicate is easy to discard. One of the most dangerous aspects of average behavior is that it feels safe. There is no immediate penalty for staying comfortable. You meet expectations, avoid criticism, and remain socially accepted. But safety is an illusion when the underlying conditions are changing. While you are maintaining balance, others are quietly building edges. When the environment finally shifts enough to demand more, the gap between those who prepared and those who coasted becomes painfully obvious. Average also limits optionality. People who operate near the middle have fewer choices when conditions tighten. They cannot negotiate as easily, pivot as quickly, or withstand disruption as calmly. Their margins are thin. Small shocks feel large because there is no buffer. In contrast, those who consistently push beyond average create excess capacity, skills, savings, credibility, and confidence that act as insurance against uncertainty. What makes this shift uncomfortable is that escaping average does not require dramatic transformation. It requires sustained intention, slightly better decisions made repeatedly, slightly higher standards applied consistently. These changes rarely produce immediate applause, which is why most people avoid them. But over time, they change your position in the system. You stop being evaluated as interchangeable and start being seen as dependable, capable, and difficult to replace. The real danger is not that average people will fail outright. It is that they will slowly lose relevance without noticing. They will work just as hard, feel just as tired, and wonder why progress feels elusive. The world has not become harsher, it has become more precise. It measures more accurately, compares more efficiently, and rewards more selectively. And in such an environment, average is no longer neutral, it is quietly expensive. Ladies and gentlemen, for most of history, competition had boundaries. You competed with the people in your town, your company, your industry, or your country. Your reference group was small, familiar, and limited by geography. That created natural protection. Even if you were not exceptional, you could still succeed by being competent within a narrow field. Today, those boundaries have dissolved, and many people are still living as if they exist. Competition is no longer local because access is no longer local. Skills, services, ideas, and effort now travel instantly across borders. The person you are competing with may live thousands of miles away, speak a different language, and operate in a different time zone, yet deliver better results faster and at lower cost. This reality is not coming in the future. It is already here, shaping outcomes quietly and relentlessly. What makes global competition especially unforgiving is that it is asymmetrical. You may be competing against someone who is hungrier, more disciplined, and more patient than you, even if they started with fewer resources. When opportunity becomes global, the best performer often wins disproportionate rewards, while average performance struggles to find traction. The middle gets squeezed not because it lacks effort, but because it lacks distinction. Local thinking encourages comfort. You compare yourself to the people around you and conclude that you are doing fine. Global competition exposes a harsher truth. Fine is no longer impressive. When employers, clients, and platforms can choose from a worldwide pool, they naturally gravitate toward the most reliable and effective option. Loyalty gives way to performance, and proximity gives way to results. Another overlooked shift is that global competition removes excuses. Delays, inefficiencies, and complacency become visible when someone else can deliver faster with fewer complaints. Standards rise without asking permission. The benchmark is no longer what is common where you live, but what is possible anywhere. Once that benchmark exists, it becomes the new normal, and everyone is measured against it whether they agree or not. This environment rewards those who think beyond their immediate surroundings. People who invest in transferable skills, clear communication, and consistent output gain access to opportunities that were once unreachable. Those who do not are left competing in shrinking, crowded spaces where margins are thin and pressure is constant. The difference is rarely intelligence. It is awareness and adaptation. Global competition also magnifies the value of reputation. When choice is abundant, trust becomes a filter. People who build a track record of reliability, professionalism, and long-term thinking stand out in a noisy world. Their names travel faster than their resumes. Meanwhile, those who rely on credentials alone discover that certificates do not compete well against proven results. The uncomfortable implication is that you are always being compared, even when you are not aware of it. Your work, your output, and your habits are silently measured against global alternatives. This is not meant to create anxiety, but clarity. Once you accept that the field is larger, your strategy must change. You stop optimizing for local approval and start optimizing for durable value. Knowing that in a world without borders, only those who raise their standards above their surroundings can remain relevant and in demand. Ladies and gentlemen, most people think of skills as static possessions. You learn something, you have it, and you move on. This view quietly limits growth because it ignores how skills actually behave over time. In reality, skills function much more like capital than credentials. When invested wisely and allowed to compound, they grow in value, expand your options, and create returns far beyond the original effort that built them. The first improvement in any skill rarely feels rewarding. Early progress is slow, awkward, and inefficient. Results lag behind effort, which is why many people abandon the process too soon. But this is also where compounding begins. Each repetition strengthens the next one. Each small correction reduces future mistakes. What looks like marginal improvement today becomes a powerful advantage when applied consistently over years. Compounding works because skills reinforce each other. Clear thinking improves decision-making. Decision-making improves prioritization. Better prioritization improves how you spend time and energy. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where one skill accelerates the growth of another. The returns are not linear, they multiply. This is why two people with similar starting points can end up in completely different positions after a decade. Unlike money, skill capital cannot be taken away easily. Markets fluctuate, technologies change, and circumstances shift, but the ability to learn, adapt, communicate, and execute transfers across environments. People who invest in these core capabilities carry their advantage with them. Wherever they go, they rebuild quickly because the underlying engine is already strong. What makes skill compounding especially powerful is that it favors patience over intensity. You do not need dramatic bursts of effort, you need steady deposits. A small amount of focused practice each day applied over long periods quietly outperforms irregular ambition. Most people underestimate how much progress this creates because they measure effort in days instead of decades. There is also a defensive side to compounding. Skills create margin. When you are competent in multiple areas, small disruptions do not destabilize you. You can shift roles, learn new tools, or take advantage of unexpected opportunities. This flexibility reduces fear and increases leverage. People without it cling to familiar routines, even when those routines stop working. The mistake many people make is chasing novelty instead of depth. They collect surface-level abilities without letting any of them mature. Compounding requires staying long enough for returns to accelerate. Depth creates authority. Authority creates trust. Trust creates opportunity. This sequence rarely appears dramatic from the inside, but it produces durable results from the outside. Over time, compounded skills change how the world responds to you. Doors open more easily. Problems feel smaller. Decisions become clearer. The effort required to achieve results decreases because past investments are doing the heavy lifting. This is the quiet reward of patience and consistency, where yesterday's discipline funds today's freedom and tomorrow's advantage. Ladies and gentlemen, raw talent attracts attention, but reliability earns trust. Talent is often loud and visible, while reliability works quietly in the background, producing results without drama. In the long run, systems, organizations, and people do not depend on flashes of brilliance. They depend on outcomes they can count on. This is why reliability, though less glamorous, consistently outperforms raw ability. Over time, talent without reliability creates volatility. It shows up strong one day and disappears the next. It delivers insight but misses deadlines. It promises potential but struggles with follow-through. While this may be tolerated early on, it becomes costly as stakes increase. When consequences matter, uncertainty becomes a liability, no matter how impressive the underlying ability appears. Reliable people reduce friction. They prepare in advance, communicate clearly, and execute consistently. Others do not need to check on them, remind them, or manage them closely. This creates a powerful advantage. When decisions are made about responsibility, leadership, or opportunity, reliability becomes the deciding factor because it lowers risk. People prefer a predictable result over a brilliant gamble. Another overlooked aspect of reliability is that it compounds trust. Each time you do what you said you would do, on time and to standard, you strengthen your reputation. That reputation travels faster than credentials. Over time, people begin to assume competence before you speak. This assumption creates leverage. You are given more autonomy, better projects, and greater influence, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Raw talent often relies on motivation, which is unstable. Reliability relies on systems, habits, and discipline. Motivation fades under pressure, but systems hold. When conditions are difficult, tired, or inconvenient, reliability continues to produce output. This consistency separates professionals from amateurs and adults from gifted beginners. It is also why reliability scales while talent alone stalls. There is also a moral clarity to reliability. It reflects respect for others' time, resources, and expectations. When you are reliable, you signal that your word has weight. This quality becomes increasingly rare in environments filled with noise, distraction, and overcommitment. As reliability declines around you, its value rises automatically. Many people believe they must choose between being talented and being reliable. This is a false trade-off. Reliability amplifies talent. It gives ability a structure through which it can be applied repeatedly. Without that structure, talent remains potential. With it, talent becomes output, and output is what the world ultimately rewards. Over time, the reliable individual accumulates advantages that talent alone cannot sustain. They build relationships that endure, roles that expand, and reputations that protect them during uncertainty. While talent may open the door, reliability is what keeps it open, widens it, and ensures that when opportunities return, your name is already on the list. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world that constantly glorifies speed, instant results, and the next viral trend, long-term thinking feels almost counterintuitive. People are obsessed with the immediate payoff, with short bursts of brilliance that often vanish as quickly as they arrive. But those who understand the compounding power of time know that genuine advantage rarely comes from a single brilliant action or a flash of inspiration. It comes from consistently applying judgment and effort over years, sometimes decades, in a disciplined, patient manner. Long-term thinking is not glamorous, but it is the ultimate edge because it allows you to build outcomes that others, chasing the quick win, cannot even begin to replicate. The person who plans for years instead of months gains leverage that is invisible in the short term but insurmountable in the long term. It transforms ordinary decisions into extraordinary results. When you think in decades instead of days, you start making choices that are unappealing to those focused on immediate gratification, but enormously rewarding for those willing to endure delayed recognition. Investments, whether in skill, reputation, relationships, or financial capital, grow exponentially when nurtured with patience. The habits you form, the knowledge you acquire, the credibility you earn, and the network you cultivate all gain a compounding effect that is almost magical in its results. It is not about being flashy, it is about being relentlessly consistent. One must resist the seductive pull of short-term distraction and focus on building capabilities and judgment that stand the test of time. Those who understand this edge recognize that luck plays a role in life, but the deliberate application of long-term thinking dramatically increases the odds in your favor. It is also about resilience. When you are anchored in a long-term perspective, temporary setbacks lose their power to derail you. Losses and failures are absorbed, learned from, and ultimately converted into knowledge and experience that further strengthen your advantage. Whereas someone seeking quick wins may panic or overreact, the long-term thinker adapts quietly, improving steadily while others flail. Another critical aspect of long-term thinking is the ability to avoid overreacting to noise. Media cycles, market swings, and social trends create the illusion that rapid adaptation is necessary. But when you have a multi-year or multi-decade horizon, the transient turbulence is less important than the underlying trajectory of your skill and influence. Decisions that seem slow or conservative at the moment often turn out to be decisive advantages in hindsight. This kind of thinking is demanding because it requires discipline, foresight, and sometimes courage to go against the herd. Most people cannot or will not defer gratification, and therein lies the edge. The one who does is quietly amassing power that no short-term effort can rival. Long-term thinking turns incremental progress into extraordinary outcomes, ordinary skills into rare capabilities, and modest advantages into near insurmountable leads. It is not flashy, it is not headline-making, but it is the ultimate form of leverage, and those who master it will find themselves in a class far above the average. The world moves fast, but compounding patience and judgment over time win every single race that matters. And this is why long-term thinking is not just an advantage, it is the decisive edge in life, business, and any field where results truly compound with effort over time.